Was trying to write a LinkedIn post and I thought I had it. You know, when you like write one and then you reread it and you fix this thing and you reread it and you fix this thing and can't think about it anymore.
See, if you just posted selfies and memes, you wouldn't have to worry about that.
I mean, I do run another LinkedIn account where I post memes.
I think LinkedIn could use more memes, personally.
I totally agree.
All right, well, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. Before we jump into the normal stuff today, I want to give a shout out to Christina for leaving some amazing feedback for the Beyond UX Design book, Master Your Craft, Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. And don't forget, if you get the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. This week's episode is brought to you by the UX Playbook. You feel lost in your UX career journey? Well, let the UX Playbook be your roadmap to success. Handcrafted by my buddy Chris Wynn for UX designers just like you, these bundles offer comprehensive guides on everything from UX fundamentals to portfolio creation to nailing your job search, and it's packed with hundreds of videos and Notion guides with real-world examples, pro tips, and exclusive bonuses. And all that makes the UX Playbook your one-stop shop to elevate your career. And because I know this will be a game changer for you, I've partnered with Chris to get everybody listening 10% off the Fast Track bundle if you use the code BEYOND when you check out. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the code BEYOND and save yourself nearly $25. Don't wait. Get your UX journey back on track with the UX Playbook and transform your career from fuzzy to focused. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join those fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then for the love of God, tell some friends. So if you're listening to this, it's early 2024, and the job market for UX designers, for lack of a better word, is kind of a shit show. Would you agree, Amy?
I would agree, sadly.
Amy wrote this awesome article a couple of weeks back and talking all about the state of UX. She did some awesome research about all of the data and the data points about what's going on with the market. So we are going to talk to my good friend Amy Santee about all of that today. I'm so excited. Excited is the wrong word. Not excited to talk about it because it's a terrible topic.
It is.
But I'm happy that we can talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think we're both excited to have this conversation and to do an episode together. But the topic at hand is kind of depressing.
It is kind of depressing. I agree. So we're gonna try to have a little fun with it today as much as we possibly can. My goal, Amy, I didn't mention this before. My goal is to laugh at least 3 times every episode.
Okay.
And if we don't do that, there's 1. Okay. That's 2. And if we don't do that, there's 3. All right. It's a success. We did it.
All right.
All right. We can go home. So we're going to be talking all about the UX job market with Amy Santee today. So take some notes, because if you have any questions about what we're going to talk about today, I'll be hosting a live event with Amy on Friday, April 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be broadcasting that live on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and Instagram. And if you're listening to this episode close to when it aired, that would be the following Friday. So we released this on a Tuesday. That's the next Friday. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/events to find out more details and all the links to find it live. You can also keep an eye out for future events, and you can check out all the previous events there too. If you missed any of them, you can watch them on beyonduxdesign.com/events or on YouTube. Just search for Beyond UX Design Podcast. So send in your questions to hello@beyonduxdesign.com, or you can even use a little handy form on the events page. Or you can holler at me on LinkedIn, and Amy will answer all your burning questions about the UX job market on April 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Amy, how does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, there's a lot to be discussed here, so that will be fun.
All right, right on. Amy Santee is a career strategist and coach for UX professionals who want to design their careers with intention and bring their good to the world. She's partnered with hundreds of people to implement a practice of self-research, self-advocacy, and strategy so they have the tools to navigate the professional world with courage and confidence. And prior to coaching, Amy built a career as a UX researcher for product development and strategy. She's a writer and speaker, but you may know Amy from classics like The Tale of the Cursed Prototype and the What is Wrong with Hiring podcast. You can learn more at amysantee.com or connect with her on LinkedIn, and we'll put all those links in the show notes. Amy, welcome to Beyond UX Design. Only your second time kind of on the show in a roundabout way, featured in the Tale of the Cursed Prototype.
Yes.
But
oh my goodness, back in Halloween of last year. That was so fun and very cool of you to put together. But yeah, thanks, Jeremy, for having me. I've been looking forward to joining you.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, we talked a little bit about your article that you wrote a couple weeks ago. Before we get into all this stuff today, tell everybody about you. I know I read your bio, but you got more than that. Tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be so, in so deep into this UX hiring mess.
I get in real deep into the things that I'm interested in. I started my UX career back in 2011 after I came out of anthropology grad school. And honestly, I didn't even know what UX was back then. I just wanted a job. I applied for any kind of qualitative research job that I could find and somehow made my way into doing consumer research and user experience research at a very large insurance company. And for a while there, I honestly didn't really know what I was doing there myself. My goal was to apply my anthropology skills and my qualitative research expertise. And eventually I sort of figured out, okay, I'm here to help businesses work on their products, to make their services better, to improve business goals, and of course, to make things better for users and customers. So I worked in UX for about a decade at a number of different companies, product types, platforms. One of my favorite places was working at eBay on the mobile app, where I got to do a lot of user research with sellers and buyers, cross-platform. I worked in automotive. I've worked on B2B, B2C, C to whatever all the acronyms are. It was a really great experience overall to work in different types of companies with lots of really cool people. And eventually, towards the end of my UX research career, as it were, I decided to first make a transition out of working inside of companies into consulting. So I had my own consulting practice. I still was doing UX research, but I was out on my own and really enjoyed running a business. And then eventually, I also had this light bulb moment of, I'm really interested in career development. I've had kind of an interesting path myself. It can be challenging for folks to get into UX, to go from academia to user experience. Done a lot of mentoring. I've been blogging about my career for, since I got in, basically. So, I think I want to do this for money. And so started my coaching practice. I got some coaching training at New York University. I worked with a business coach to set up my practice. And I, got a brand new website and brand and all of that stuff. And really just went all in to being a career coach, and careers being the focus of my work, helping people not only to find jobs that they like, that they're good at, that they enjoy, where they feel valued, but also to help people make really hard decisions and kind of walk alongside them and helping people make decisions with confidence. And those can be really big life decisions, like deciding to quit corporate and go out on your own. It can be figuring out how to go up for a promotion or take care of some kind of business at work where they want to have someone to talk about these decisions and challenges with and get strategic about moving forward.
And so I imagine your coaching over the last 6 months, year, I don't really know. I mean, we've been seeing layoffs for a while, but it's crazy because there was a boom during COVID and everybody was like, oh my God, thousands of jobs. And then almost overnight, it seems like, for I don't think great reason, which I think we can kind of get into, but it seems like overnight someone just realized, hey, we hired too many people maybe? I don't really know exactly, but overnight just layoff. And then you've been looking at the numbers, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off in software. Talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. Yeah. And in tech in general, I would say this needs to factor in tech workers at non-tech companies, right? So we're looking at tech workers essentially. Since the middle of 2022, we have seen what I estimate to be over 500,000 layoffs. And the reason I say I estimate that is because the main tracker website that people go to right now, which is layoffs.fyi, has it at about 450,000 as of, well, I guess it's February 1st. So as of today, about 450,000 people. But the reason my estimate is higher is because I don't think it really reflects the layoff of contractors who have been cut, right? So people who are working at companies, but who aren't technically full-time employees. It does not, I don't think, accurately reflect layoffs, again, at companies that aren't considered tech or product companies. There's also a trend right now of companies wanting their employees to come back into the office and saying, hey, if you don't come back, then you're going to have to quit your job. And that's really, if you look at a form of laying people off without actually having to lay them off.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned that. And in your article, you call this out specifically, and I think it's worth highlighting that, like, that is tech companies. That's like the Fangs, the Metas, the, Twitters, X, whatever you want to call it.
Startups.
And so, I don't know, like, I guess I wouldn't be in that list. My team at like a manufacturing company, big global manufacturing company, probably doesn't fall into that category, I would imagine. So that's at least 7.
Did you see your company on that list by chance?
I did not. No.
So there you go.
I didn't go through the entire list, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I mean, like, Kroger, for instance, I don't know that they lay people off, but they have a huge software team, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge, I mean, I would consider those a software company. Kroger's pretty damn impressive, actually, when you think about some of the software they're building. But nobody would think of them as a tech company, and clearly they're probably not. They're not falling in that list. Not to say they laid people off. Right. I actually have no idea. I'm just using an example of software teams at non-tech companies.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. The question is, like, what really is a tech company anymore? And what we're referring to as tech companies, really, they're advertising companies. They're just building the tech to make that advertising happen, and all of the product ecosystem around that, right? So yes, the question is tech workers, engineers, designers, researchers, people who do the hiring, right? Like recruiters. Of course, we saw a lot of them get laid off initially. And so I would consider all of these people to be tech workers in that they help build tech and make tech companies run.
So that's setting the stage for the conversation today. I think you could read Amy's post. She did a really great job of laying that out and all the research that she did. And actually, on your podcast, What's Wrong with Hiring, you even did an audio version of it. So if you don't want to read it, because it's a lot to read, if you don't want to read it, listen, it's good. But anyway, what I want to talk to you today about is really just from like a coaching perspective, as someone who is a coach. What are the types of things that we need to help people understand about one, what is happening, whether or not we can actually forecast how long it might happen, how deep it'll go, if it's done, if it's not done, whatever. And then we're going to talk about some other stuff too. So I want to dig a little bit into this idea of like the reality of the situation. Like, I think a lot of people are stressing out, clearly. As somebody who has been looking for a job since December, I haven't had a lot of traction. But I'm one person. Obviously, I think a lot of other people are. It's sort of the reality. And you sort of have to ask yourself, like, what do you do? It's funny because I got laid off the day I got laid off, December 8th. I knew that I was going to have a hard time finding anything in December. I knew early 2024, I even like prepped my wife. I'm like, maybe I can get a job waiting tables or bartending or something. And you even call that out in your article about like finding other things. I'm curious, just like facing reality, that idea of just like, it is what it is. What are you telling people right now about just the current state?
Yeah. Well, as we know, or I think it is safe to conclude anyway, that UX has been hit pretty hard. People working in design, designers, researchers, content strategists, UX writers, design and research operations, the bit of data or analysis that's out there, plus what we're seeing in our social media feeds on LinkedIn, right, within our community of practice, it's pretty safe to conclude that we've been hit hard, and probably disproportionately hard to, say, developers or engineers, which, there's just a lot more of them out there, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot of people in our community who are hurting, stressed out. They're seeing all of this around them and going like, gosh, do I even have a chance? Like, should I even bother looking for a job? And I mean, we're all having to make some important decisions right now about our work in this field and what our goals are and what our priorities are. And I actually think that's a really great place for people to start and look at
Mm,
themselves and go, okay, you know, if I've been laid off or if I think a layoff might be coming at my company or on my team, what is it that I really care about right now? Is it supporting my family? That's my number one thing. All right, well, maybe staying in UX and finding another job to meet a certain income threshold is going to be the best choice for you. If that takes a while, then, to your point, finding some other kind of work just for the time being can also help. Maybe your priority is just continuing to grow your skills and gain experience in UX. Okay, so each of us is going to have our individual priorities and goals, and that's really what we should start with when we're making decisions about what to do. And so, some things that have changed are in terms of looking for jobs, success rates, and timeline for finding a job. It was not uncommon a couple of years ago, and frankly, over the past decade or so, to be able to go out, interview, and find a job within a few months. And also not uncommon for people to have multiple offers at once from big, fancy tech companies with competitive compensation packages. That is really not the norm now, even for the, I don't know, people with the fanciest resumes and the most impressive experience. Everyone is having a challenging time looking for a position and even getting bites back on their resumes. Sending those things into the void is always a mystery. And sometimes we don't hear back and sometimes we do. But it seems like people are getting fewer replies, fewer invites to come chat about a position. People who go through the entire interview process are also getting more no's than they used to, even if they're a perfect fit for the role. So, just practically speaking, the job search is taking much longer for everyone at every level. Now, we can also say, especially for entry level UXers, where there haven't always been enough jobs to begin with.
I've seen also too, in my experience, just an increase in ghosting, like not even getting a no, just, like, and I'm thinking like probably what's happening is they're just like laying the, I don't know what you might call this, but sort of like the groundwork to just come back in a month when that person didn't work out because you know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe that's true. Maybe I'm just feeling that, but I don't know. I've seen an increase in the ghosting.
So, part of it, right, is all of the recruiters getting laid off. And so,
Overwhelmed.
what's
Yeah.
happening, is like the recruiting teams inside of companies are smaller. They have fewer resources. They still have to hire a lot of people, but they're asked to do more with less.
Yeah.
And so it's putting a huge strain on recruiters who, want to just be able to do their job, but are, under these tight deadlines and the systems are kind of breaking down. And they weren't very good to begin with at a lot of places, right? Like ghosting and non-responses or just any of the other issues that we see in the hiring process come up. Those are done better at some companies and they're not done so well at other companies. And so things just seem exacerbated now.
I want to talk a little bit about like the language and the reason why people are getting laid off. It seems like really inconsistent. And I'm curious, like what impact does that have on one, the people who have been laid off, two, the people who haven't been laid off, but probably are very nervous that they may be laid off, and the people looking for work. Is there like what when we hear like all these basically BS, let's call it out, like a lot of times they seem very BS kind of HR approved reasons. What happens to the rest of us?
Yeah. It's really easy to internalize a layoff as a personal failure of some kind. Or if 10% of your company gets laid off and you're within that group of 10% of people, it's like, well, why was it this 10% of people? And so that's a common response that I see, to take it as a personal failure or mistake. And that can really be harmful to one's mindset when, well, just in general, right? Like that's not a very nice feeling to have. But if you're going to jump into a job search, it doesn't help with having a mindset of, being someone who is qualified to do a job, but having this like red flag layoff on your resume. And I think what we can see happening is because it is becoming so frequent and more common that sort of stigma of being laid off is probably not as strong as it used to be. And there are a lot of stigmas actually that are going away, or at least becoming less of an issue, say like having a resume gap. You quit your job or you got laid off and you have not been working for 6 months or a year. And that's also becoming more common and like less of a concern from hiring managers and recruiters, right? Not to say that there aren't people out there who still question things like that, whether or not that's fair or that's like a bias that's acceptable. Like that's another question, right? So yeah, I think there's some things within the hiring conversation that are changing. But yeah, so if we actually look at the reason for the layoffs, no one can agree on the reason. There's a lot of proposed reasons. There are, I think, many reasons for the layoffs, and it's not just like one thing. If you look at a lot of the companies that are laying people off, they're very wealthy companies. They have billions of dollars, like their stock price goes up quarter over quarter. But then they say, we have to cut costs. We have to cut operating expenses. Well, then you lay off a bunch of people and the stock price continues to go up and, revenue is going up and all of these other success metrics. And so it's like, okay, if you had to cut costs, but you're actually still making more money, that doesn't make sense to the everyday person who isn't in charge of these business decisions, right? So that's a common thing. There's very abstract concepts out there about like recessions and the economy. And like, I don't even think if you sat 10 people down, would they even agree on what the definition of the economy even is? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
what
good
does that
point.
actually mean? And whose economy are we talking about? Are we talking about like a certain group of people's economy? Right. So there are some things out there that aren't really helpful. And I think it leaves a pervasive kind of cloud of mystery. And human beings, we are innately wired to want to make meaning out of everything that happens to us. So here we're trying to say, okay, why did this layoff happen? Why did it happen to me? Why is it happening to the people in my community? And there's only so much that we can really conclude about that. And frankly, I think it also does have to do with overhiring to some extent, remote work, and the shift back to in-office work for a lot of places. I think it also has to do with workers, white-collar workers, tech workers, information or knowledge workers, whatever you want to call this group of people being laid off right now. And over the past couple of years, we gained a lot of power during the pandemic because of
Yeah.
the shift to remote work, because we had more control over our lives, more flexibility to get work done in the way we wanted to. And it was going great. And it's actually very beneficial for the bottom line of companies when workers are happier, right? And when they have that control and flexibility, right? So, but there is kind of I think, a power grab happening here where, salaries got really big, remote work. Oh, shoot, we need to like rein those workers back in and assert more of that control back over them.
Yeah, the irony is that you would imagine that not having to have an office would actually decrease operating expenses. And so
Yeah.
the forcing people to come back to the office so that you can pay for not just the property, but the utilities, the security, the infrastructure, the power, the water, the snacks, the security guards, the front desk, all the badge systems and everything else.
Right.
Seems like, to me at least, I don't really know. I've never really been in charge of a mega corporation. Seems like it would actually decrease operating costs to let them stay where they are. But, what do I know? I'm just a laid off designer. I don't know. What do I know?
Well, you that's a fair point. And real estate in our society is an investment vehicle. And so when the real estate isn't being used, then the people who invested in the real estate are not seeing returns. And who gets to shoulder that burden? The workers.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
I think there's a lot of things happening here that are pointing out flaws and issues within the system that we work in that are affecting a class of workers who have not been affected by this stuff before.
Sure.
Oh
Yeah.
shit, like I can lose my cushy tech job. Like, yes, layoffs have happened. We had the dot-com crash in the year 2000. We had the Great Recession, which started in late 2007 and ended in mid 2009. Of course, there have been issues before. And as you will hear people say, it's a cyclical thing, right? Doesn't mean it's necessary, doesn't mean it's good or acceptable. But I think this one feels a bit different than previous times. I don't know. What do you think? Do I need to be going on the like QAnon, like, you know?
Don't go down that route, please. Please, for the love of God. Yeah, I mean, I hate to be like all like secret cabal about it, but like it definitely does feel like, I mean, and look, let's face it, these big giant multi-billionaires, right? They don't have billions of dollars sitting in a tower like Scrooge McDuck. It's invested in a lot of other things. And I'd be shocked, Amy, if a lot of their investment wasn't tied up in real estate. And this has something to do with it. I mean, just saying, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, you're absolutely right. It's an investment field. Now, listen, I will totally 100%. I understand that, like, you know, not going into a giant office, it kills mom and pop shops down the street that survived on the lunch rush, the little stores and stuff that all survive. You know, I totally get it. It kills like some stuff like that. And I see a benefit to being in person. I'm personally pro hybrid. I like going in because I like people and I like going into an office every once in a while. But I'm not anti-hybrid by any means. But I definitely understand. I get wanting to go in the office, but to lay off a bunch of people, I don't know. I think it's a bunch of BS personally. That's my opinion. I don't know.
Look, it's all of these things, right? It's not just one of these things. It's not two major drivers. It's all of these factors. And the fact of the matter is that everyday workers like me and you, we can't do anything about it.
Sure.
We can't do anything about the layoffs in the current system we have, especially if we're not unionized, if we're not organized, we cannot do anything about it. What we can do is something about our own lives, our own day-to-day activities, how we spend our time, how we prioritize in order to go out and find a new job, in order to, you know, take care of our families and to live the best lives that we can. And so I think going back to your earlier question about, you know, how to react to or even respond to layoffs, that's really the place to start, is with ourselves and what we're able to control in the situation.
And you know what's really interesting, and this is something I think we're going to talk about education in a little bit, but the supply and demand of all of this. And there's obviously, there's clearly not an equilibrium. We're not like, you know, for anybody not aware of economics, you got the one curve when they meet in the middle. That's when you've got supply and demand at equilibrium, when you have a demand that matches supply. And clearly we have way higher supply of UX people looking for work than the number of actual open jobs. And at some point, I feel like there will be people, and this is the secret hand at work, I guess, but or the invisible hand at work, but you're gonna have people who like opt out, and they're like, you know what, I'm done. This is how I'm responding. I'm gonna go learn how to be a carpenter and join a freaking union and be done with this bullshit, right? Like, I think about that all the time. I should have been. If I could go back in time and give young Jeremy, some advice, I'd be like, learn how to become a master plumber, join a goddamn union, and make just as much money as you're making now. And join a union. And you could
still do a podcast.
And you could still do a podcast about plumbing. I could even do like YouTube shorts and everything. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, but you know, that's the kind of stuff that I think at some point, we'll talk about education in a minute. But I think that's something worth calling out. Like you mentioned this, like that is what you can control. You can control yourself. You can control what you do. And if this is like too much, like there are opportunities, free trade schools. I know like my city, I live in Covington, Kentucky, which is like right across the river from Cincinnati. They have a free program for anybody interested in like historic restoration, because we have this like tons of old, like 200, 150-year-old houses all over the place that are like falling apart. And they have like, you can learn how to like restore old houses, you know, and like that's worth premium money. You can charge a whole shitload of money. Anyway.
That's awesome. And it's probably fun.
Not a day goes by that I don't go think about doing that. And I'm sure it's fun.
Yeah, creative.
Exactly. I feel like Peter Gibbons from Office Space. So I'm just like, just get outside, working with my hands, you know. Anyway.
Yes. I have my red stapler on my desk.
There you go.
Here.
Hell yeah. You know what I'm talking about. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about this, like predictions of like how long it's going to happen, how many more, you know, that's, I think the thing right now, it's like the layoffs are stressful, but the other thing that's really stressful is like, how much longer is it going to last? How many more people are going to like blah, 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 you know, all that stuff. So you hear a lot of people trying to forecast this stuff. And I'm curious, like from your perspective, what do you have to say about that when people ask you like, how much longer is this going to last? How many more people are going to get laid off? What do you say?
No one really knows. I think if we look at maybe 3 or 6 months, you know, safely, it's probably not going to be great, like just generally for the hiring market. I can't say who will have more layoffs and how many. I mean, we have had some CEOs just flat out say, we will have more layoffs this year. For example, Google. And I don't know, there are some others. And so, yes, I think we can predict more layoffs will absolutely happen. How many and when, and for how many years or months this will go on for, I have no idea. Layoffs is one part of it. The other part of it is hiring freezes and budgets and the addition of jobs. And so even if layoffs go down over time and we're, done with mass layoffs, the question remains, when will those jobs come back? How many of them will come back? At what levels? And again, I don't have the answer to this question. Really, no one has the answer to this question except for the people making these decisions. Right. And I don't know those people. Yeah. Right. They're going to like a Sting concert at the fucking, Davos having some conversations like, how many people you're going to lay off next week?
The Bilderberg group. They just do it over like the children's blood of children while they sip on the,
Exactly. It's true. No.
I've been there. I snuck in.
It's like, is it true? Is it not true? I don't know.
Who knows?
It's yes. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, there's just so many factors, right? And something that I talked about in my article is AI. And, is AI playing a role? I think it is playing a role. Companies are jumping on the bandwagon, developing AI technology, especially these really big ones that are kind of leading the way, Amazon and Google and Meta and all of these, right? So I think that is definitely a factor here. I think companies will eventually realize that certain jobs cannot be done by artificial intelligence. Like we need humans. They want to give it a shot. It kind of actually reminds me of shipping products that you don't really research or test beforehand. You're like, well, let's just see how it goes. And then we can like fix it later.
Yeah. Ship fast and break stuff, the economy,
Right. Except it's people now.
Yeah. It's interesting because I actually wonder this myself. Like I am not personally in charge of a giant company hiring and firing thousands of people, but I often wonder if the perception that AI can replace my employees is playing into this. Whether or not it actually can is irrelevant, right? If they're making that decision. It's the perception that AI can replace X number. And I'm willing to bet some jackass CEO has done calculations like, we can replace 1.75% of our employees, or blah, 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 whatever, with AI. And I'm wondering, I have no proof to this by any means, but I just wonder if that perception that AI can replace people is because, just like you said, why are we going to pay $250,000, $300,000 a year for this person, lay them off, try it out, see what happens, and if not, we'll just hire them again in a year, at half the price, because they've been desperate for a job, they'll take whatever they can get,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm wondering, does that resonate with you?
All right. Think about the priorities of business owners and CEOs and executives, the folks making these decisions. Their priorities are to use the business as a vehicle to create more wealth. And so every single decision they make, whether or not in the long run it's going to be beneficial, is oriented towards let's get that stock price up, at the next earnings call. Let's make shareholders happy by indicating to them that we're staying on the cutting edge of technology, right? Because shareholders buy shares in a stock because they want to make more money, right? So if you think of those things as like the main drivers for decision making, it could very well be that laying a bunch of people off and focusing on AI and going lean and mean and stuff like that. Like a lot of that messaging will get people excited, buy more stock, the stock price goes up and all of that. And maybe after a few years, they realize we need some more of those workers back. Yeah. And then by doing a hiring spree, that makes them look good again, right?
There's PR. Yeah,
exactly. And a big struggle we have in UX is trying to get people to do things for long-term benefits and not just like, hey, what KPIs do we want to meet this quarter to make the stock go up? It's like, if we do this thing, it'll pay off in 5 years. That's too long, Jeremy. That's way too long for them to wait for creating some kind of value, right? And so I think that's like what all of this is anchored in is decisions that are oriented towards those specific goals, and they may not make sense to the everyday person.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about as far as predictions go, I know there are a lot of people out there making predictions. I'm curious for anybody listening that's reading those predictions, what do you have to say about those predictions that are floating around and that kind of stuff? What are your thoughts?
Have you seen any predictions of interest that you want to discuss?
Not necessarily. I've seen a lot of doom and gloom type predictions. I haven't seen anyone say anything. Oh, it'll be over in 6 months. Everything's fine. And I'm just curious, like, the thing that I struggle with is like the doom and gloom predictions. Like, I'm not calling anybody out because there's just a ton of people out there, but like, it doesn't help for the people who are currently, one, still working, because there is a bit of survivorship kind of guilt, I guess, survivor guilt. That's probably stressing people out. It's funny that you just mentioned, like, you know, Google's going to, like, we're going to have more, like, what does that do to your productivity? That just like tanks the productivity of anyone still there. You know, it's just crazy that they would announce that. Even if they were planning it. I mean, I get transparency and all, but at the same time, like, you're just freaking people out. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying, I think it's like the predictions, the doom and gloom, because nobody really knows. It just stresses people out. They don't have jobs. You're getting stressed out. You're job hunting. You're stressed out. You're still working. You're stressed out. And overall, to what end? Like, what's the point of, I mean, it just, you know, I don't know, because it's not really helpful, I guess, is what I'm saying. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I mean, information is what's helpful, like valid, reliable information. And we're missing that in large part. And in my article, I culled together as many things as I could possibly find from different researchers and designers out there on UX jobs trends, layoffs, and, you know, just all as much as I could possibly bring together to try and make sense of what's going on, because no one was doing that. There were different perspectives out there using different data sets. And I would say if you find someone who's making predictions based not on any data or any rationale whatsoever, then those are the ones you want to ignore. If people are looking at data but not considering all angles, you know, like, it's up to us individually and as a community to make sense of what's going on in the best way possible, given that that we don't have access to super accurate information. We can't predict the future. We can kind of just make educated guesses about what might be happening. Now, the doom and gloom part, I think that's there is a lot of doom and gloom. Like, if you go on LinkedIn, you're just scrolling and you see all these people being laid off. You're seeing people, you know, their anger is coming through, and it's absolutely valid to be angry and disappointed and feel betrayed, right? Because we give our all to our jobs and we're expected to be loyal, good, hardworking employees. And then they turn around and just take away our livelihoods. That's what's happening here. And so I totally understand that. And things are not looking good right now. Again, let's say the layoffs ended at the end of this year. What is the speed or rate at which those jobs will come back, if they do come back? I don't know, right? And so doom and gloom I feel like there's a difference between doom and gloom and information that is not optimistic, and we have to kind of choose how to respond to that information, right? And so I think with my article, my intention was to bring together whatever I could to make sense of what's going on and to let people know, like, hey, this is my conclusion out of this, and I can't make actually a lot of conclusions, right? For the reasons I just mentioned to you, and you know what we've been discussing here about our inability to predict things or to even understand things that are, you know, like economics and all of that. I don't really understand very much about that, right? So I would say try to find information that's going to help you make the right decision for yourself, knowing that you can't predict everything that might happen. We only have so much information to work with. And this relates back to what we were discussing earlier with my coaching, right? So people need to make really important decisions for their lives and their careers. And there's only so much information that they have to work with, knowing that there will always be a risk involved. There will always be unknowns that come up in the future. And so I would say, try to stay informed with what's going on, but also be aware of how you're being psychologically affected by what people are discussing out there. And if it means, you know, getting off of LinkedIn and not doom scrolling on LinkedIn all day, every day. Yeah, like look for other ways to spend your time and be really purposeful in hanging out on social media where these conversations are happening. I should probably take my own advice with that as well.
Yes, likewise. Yeah, same for me. I'm way too much. I've tied my like marketing to my own businesses and stuff to LinkedIn though. That's the problem. It's like I have no other way to share this stupid crap, and now I'm like I can't wait to get to the point where I don't need it anymore. I get the hell off of LinkedIn. One day. So I want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to get to education. Before we do that, I want to talk about survival strategies for the people that are still at a company that have not been laid off. Because again, this is just as stressful. I know, like, because I've been on both sides of layoffs. I've been there when people have gotten laid off and stuck around and felt really bad. And I've been laid off, and I know, like, both. And so there's a bit of stress involved with staying on. You're getting more work. They usually don't cut the work with all the people they left. They usually give you the extra work. So that's pretty stressful. Survival strategy, things that you maybe, what advice might you give to people who are still currently employed, worried about what's going on?
We have to spend time grieving the loss, first of all. If you think of the stages of grief, it's like, okay, the loss happens. You have to acknowledge it, and you have to start at your speed, right? Because everyone processes loss and grieves differently. You have to start moving towards healing of some kind. And that can be individual healing and communal healing, right? Because this is happening not just to individual people, but to us as a UX community, as a tech worker community, whatever it might be. How can you start moving towards healing by acknowledging, accepting what's happening, knowing that there's very little that you can do about the things that are happening, but that you can do something about staying connected with people and supporting each other and prioritizing yourself and your health and well-being in stressful times. What kind of boundaries can you be setting? Hey, you just laid off half the team. Well, that means, like, we're going to have to deprioritize a lot of projects. I can't take any more projects on. Sorry. And I know it might be scary because it's like, okay, bunch of the team just got laid off. We have all these things to do, and I'm being asked to do them. And I'm afraid if I don't, I'll get laid off. I think, assessing the situation at hand is going to be important there, right? It's a matter of really putting yourself first and knowing that there will be a risk in really anything that you do, but being able and prepared to kind of accept the results of a decision if that gets, made. So I would say that, and, eventually as we go through the grieving process, we start to move towards like a fuller acceptance. There's definitely going to be some anger in there. And again, all of the anger and disillusionment and disappointment is very valid. And how can you channel all of that stuff into positive actions or even just supporting yourself? I'm not going to take on anything extra. I'm going to remain in contact and support folks as best as I can. I'm also going to make sure that I have the support system that I need within the company, outside of the company. It could be within your community. It can be a therapist. It could be a coach. There's a number of things that we can incorporate into our support system to make sure that we're able to make it through these times. What has worked for you?
I have some answers there, but I want to talk about the grief piece.
Oh, yes.
Because this is real. And I think it's worth acknowledging on both sides. Like, obviously getting laid off sucks and is a time to grieve. But even for the people who were left behind, those people that were laid off, very often, like, sometimes you might have a 30-day notice, whatever, but a lot of times it's like instant. It's like out the door, and maybe it's a little different now when people were remote, but like, if you think about back in the day, we were there 40 hours a week on site, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 for the most part. We saw those people more than we saw our families at home, which is like sad to think about, right? 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. You think about like how many hours do you actually see your kids every week?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, you're on 48 hours in the weekend, but like, even then you're sleeping most of the time, right? And so like, how many hours are in a day? You see those people more than you see your family often. And they're just gone
yep.
in like an instant. And let's be honest, you're probably not going to see most of those people again.
Mm-hmm.
That's like real loss, man. I mean, it's not death because it's not eternal, but like still, there is a sense of grief and a sense of loss there on every side that I think is like absolutely worth calling out. And especially my first layoff a few years ago was in the middle of COVID, and we all went home thinking like, hey, I'll see you in a couple weeks. Remember that? We're like, it'll be over in a couple weeks. And we all went home thinking it's going to be a couple weeks. It turned into a month. And then they're like, hey, sorry, you're done. And I never saw those people again. Most of them. I see a few of them. But like for the most part, the team of like 70 people, I've never seen them again. And we tried to stay in touch. We had a Slack channel, which was nice and all that, but that kind of petered off and, all that stuff. But anyway, I think that's like the grief part is like absolutely 100% worth calling out.
Yeah, it's true. Our coworkers become our friends, and sometimes very much like a family. And I think it is a healthy boundary to not look at work as a family. And I think it's, propaganda when companies say, we're like a family here. That's not a good situation to walk into, right? Because there's a lot of implications for lack of boundaries and toxicity and all of that. But we have a better time at work when we have good relationships with our coworkers. And we meet people who we're friends with for the rest of our lives. We meet people who we marry our coworkers sometimes, right? Like,
seriously, yeah.
We have real relationships. Yeah. And, the layoffs that I've gone through in the last company I worked at, that's very much how I felt immediately when I walked into work one morning. I saw a very strange sign on one of the doors that said, like, employee outplacement something, right?
Oh,
and I was like, wow, what is going on here?
Oh,
and no one else was in the office, and I totally freaked out. And so we were having layoffs that day, and I lost most of my team that I'd been working with for years.
Right.
And I felt gutted. I totally get what that is like. And that's been happening for everyone, whether you're in the office or remote. And it's like you immediately lose contact, sever ties. The person loses all access to communication methods. And so it is a huge loss. And I think acknowledging it, yes, is very important. This is a very human thing that we're experiencing.
For sure. All right. So you asked me a question. I didn't answer. I said, you asked me about what do I do? Coping mechanisms? Is that what you asked about? Laying off or pre-layoff?
Yeah. Like thinking back to any experiences that you've had with a layoff and you were not laid off, you were remaining one of the few who were able to remain in your position. Like, were there any coping mechanisms or perspectives that were helpful for you?
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest thing for me was the guilt, the survivor's guilt, And so last time this happened, I used to do web design. I host my own websites and all that. So I have a shared server. So I was like, anybody I'll host a site for you. You need to put a resume on it. Like, even if they were product managers or whatever, I was like, I'll put up a site, simple, WordPress, because I'm, a man of a certain age. I still use WordPress. Don't come at me, So anyway, but I would host that and I'd be like, hey, put it up, here's your resume, whatever.com, buy the URL. Let me know. I'll hook you up with a website for free for 6 months or however long I can do it. So that was something I would do, just like anything I can do to help. Obviously, like, sending job referrals or stuff like that. But I think like checking in on people, like I think there's like a certain thing, because I know like getting laid off, like at a certain point I was like, can you please stop asking me how I'm doing? Like, I'm fine. I'm seriously fine, But I mean, there are certain people that don't feel that way and would love to check in, have people check in. So I think like, hey, are you, maybe even ask, like, are you okay if I keep checking in on you? Do you want me to check in on you? Are you okay? Do you, because some people want it, some people definitely don't, and it's hard to know what everyone is like. And I think being just upfront, asking like, hey,
that's true.
What can I do? Like, can I help? Is there something I can do? Do you need a referral? Do you need this? And I think like being explicit and like asking, I mean, like, hey, we're thinking about you. Like, that doesn't really do anything, but like, right. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I think just being there, being aware, like, hey, you want to grab coffee? Hey, I got a thing. Hey, I know this person. Hey, here's this referral. I don't know. That's just, I don't know if that was like enough, but those are some things like I would do last time I had to go through that. But,
and you're obviously very generous, and we're seeing a lot of generosity amongst people trying to help their coworkers who have been laid off, whether it's reviewing their materials or making connections or leaving a LinkedIn profile recommendation, right?
Yeah.
But what about you? What about you? Like, how do you take care of yourself, right? Because you said
I see. Yeah,
we have like, we have all this guilt. We have to take on more work. It's stressful. We just lost a bunch of people that we care about. We're not happy with the people making the decisions, like morale goes down. And I'm wondering, because we're always so inclined to help other people, and that's amazing and essential, like, do you have any ideas for how we can just support our own selves?
Like self-care type stuff.
Yeah.
I think like just shutting the computer and taking a break, like going for a walk, like getting out and just like not thinking, reading a book, writing something down, watching Netflix, I'm playing a video game, like whatever it is that you need to do to like, I had to sit on the toilet for 30 minutes, like whatever it is, and just like zone out, and just like take a break. I think like overthinking it doesn't help. Thinking about it helps, but overthinking it does not help. I mean, like to your point, your article, you had a lot of data and digest the data, but then like analyzing and analyzing and analyzing and analyzing and analyzing and just like your head explodes is not helpful. Right. So like,
Mhm.
I think that's the doom scrolling is definitely not helpful. Like, that kind of stuff I would say is probably the way I would handle it for me. Getting out and just like being, well, I need a break, like
Mhm.
I can tell you like when
Mhm.
I got laid off, I was lucky because I had a bunch of backlog episodes, but like I had to take December off from like podcast and everything. Like I still put the
Yeah.
episodes out, but like, I mean, you and I were talking, I was going to do like a Christmas episode, like do like another stupid Christmas story. And that just didn't happen at all. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing that. I'm not even going to try. I probably could have done it, but I was like, I don't need to do it. And nobody's going to know if I don't do it. It doesn't matter. But
Exactly.
I already had episodes recorded. So I mixed the episodes. I even did I think most of December, I just published, back catalog stuff. Like, oh, it's a throwback episode. Just so I didn't have to do anything. Cause I was like, I can't. So like for me, it was, I think like some people though, you know, focusing on work or side hobbies may have been beneficial for them, like that would have helped them a little bit. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I
Mhm.
think it all depends on the person. I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
It does. It does. And we can become burned out if we put a lot of effort and resources into helping others. We want to do that. We know it's good. But at a certain point, what are you sacrificing with your own well being? Right. And so it's funny, we're an individualistic society in America, but then many of us are also community oriented. But then we forget about our individual selves, and our well-being and health has to be good for us to be most effective at helping other people. So I think just finding some balance with that is a good idea, and going, I looked at 5 resumes this week. That's good enough. I made some connections, I can do this, this, and this, but like that is what I have to cap it at. And it's not selfish. It's
Yeah.
just taking care of yourself and taking care of other people at the same time.
Before you're on an airplane, put your mask on before you put your kid's mask on. Like you can't take care of other
Mhm.
people if you aren't taking care of yourself first. And I think that's,
Yep.
it feels selfish a little bit, but like you can only do so much. If you're burnt out and stressed out and depressed and all that, like you can't help other people. So, you got to do what you got to do to take care of yourself. Like one thing we keep talking about the education. I know we talked for a little while. I know you probably got a hard stop. I want to talk a little bit about the future from the new UX designer's perspective and the people that still want to get into UX design because it's still a great career. It's still a wonderful profession. If you can get the job, it's great. There's people that are still considering it. Why people are still considering it, I don't know, but people are. A lot of people that listen to the show are looking for work and things like that. I want to talk about those up and coming designers, the next generation, some words of advice for them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we rely on new generations of designers to come in and be part of this field and do this work. It's an amazing field to be in. It's constantly evolving, becoming more diverse. I think it's a really, we have our challenges, but all in all, I think it's a great field to be in. And jobs were fairly hard to come by for newbies, if you will, over the past several years because it's easier for people to want to hire folks with some experience so they can jump right in, do the job, don't really need any training or upskilling, right? And the fact of the matter is, students coming out of boot camps or HCI degree programs or social sciences, right? Like they have a lot of skills that can be applied and they know how to do a lot of stuff, but there's some stuff that they just haven't learned yet, right? So I think that's part of the issue. Right now, of course, people at all levels of experience are getting laid off, and hiring managers are continuing to want to hire people with experience. So it's not that the door has completely closed, but it's like there's a very small sliver of space where new folks can get in. So it's kind of about expectation setting. What is the timeline that you have to work with? What can you be doing in the meantime to continue making the transition, knowing it can be a little bit longer than you planned, or maybe a lot longer than you planned. Again, it's hard to say. And also being really careful with how you spend your money and your time on upskilling, on continued education, on doing projects for your portfolio and whatnot. There are a lot of like services out there, training programs, boot camps, career coaches, all of these things. And it's really important to look at each offering and ask yourself, is this going to help me achieve my goals and my specific unique goals, right? Not just like flat out helping all designers move towards their career. It's like, does this align with my specific goals and timeline? Is it a good use of my money? Like, is it a good investment in my career? Does it look legit? Do the instructors, does this coach have a background in UX? Do they talk openly about the state of the field? Are they silent about that? Right. And I do see some variation in the acknowledgement of the situation from company to company and person to person. And so I would just, again, be very careful with what you decide to spend your money and time on so you know that you're getting some actual value out of it. And frankly, UX has had a problem with this for many years of all kinds of boot camps popping up, and I think very few of them actually being really good investments for a career. Some of them are flat out sketchy. Some of them are led by people who don't know what they're doing, right? Or who make really appealing promises about landing a job in 3 months and making a six-figure salary in your first UX job, right? It used to be more possible than it is now. It's not going to be as easy as it used to be. But what are the promises people are making and why? And are they being transparent and honest with their ability to help you achieve a goal that you've set out for yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. And something too, like I've done a lot of mentoring and stuff over the years. And something I hear a lot of people say often, and this was even before all the layoffs, is like, I'm putting stuff on credit cards while I look for a UX job. And I'm just like, why are you not waiting tables? Like, Jesus Christ, like, go do something retail. Like, what are you doing putting money on a credit card while you look for a deal? Like, well, I really want a UX job. I'm like, yeah, me too. I mean, Jesus Christ, like, you're just killing yourself. Like, what are you doing? And I think, like, look at something like, the acting industry. Like, how many actors go get jobs waiting tables while they, like, look for an acting job? It's not like they're putting everything on a credit card while they find an acting job. So, I mean, this is, crazy talk to me. It's like, if you are looking for a UX job, please, for the love of God, like, look for, and even I would say this too, like, I think getting a job in the service industry, while it is not a directly transferable job, obviously, it is not a UX job, to be clear. There are a lot of interpersonal skills that you will learn waiting tables that I can guarantee you will be applicable once you get a job. It might not be UX skills, hard skills, but dealing with people, talking with strangers you don't know, dealing with stuff on the spot, the stress, all that stuff of a rush and then being in the weeds, those things will help you. And if nothing else, you make some money while you're waiting for a job.
Exactly.
So I don't know.
Yeah, acting is a great parallel here, right? Like, it's very uncommon to become a famous actor, okay? It's more common to become a UX designer or researcher than an actor, right? Like, just thinking about how all of those things work. But I think it's a good parallel because entry-level UX jobs right now are like the elusive, become a famous actor scenario. Okay. I think they're really just as sparse and there's a lot of competition. And if someone wants to go into UX, awesome. Just be realistic with the timeline. It's not going to happen anytime soon for most people. If you haven't already been working in UX, it's going to be hard. And that's just a reality. And I think accepting that reality, again, looking at the data, talking to different people, getting different perspectives, thinking about what you can do in the meantime. And if your main goal is like, I just need to bring in some money to pay my bills, it's okay if it's not related to UX, right? And so, yeah, putting stuff on credit cards, like, everyone has their own financial situation. And, if you're starting to go into debt, and you are not really sure if getting that job is going to happen in the near future, then that might be something to reconsider. If you asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, is it okay if someone goes to a boot camp, puts the boot camp on their credit card, the boot camp looks legit, lots of students get jobs from it, I would say, yeah, if you feel like you can get a job in a few months, it's a good investment to do that thing, to get your job and to pay that boot camp off with your pretty good salary that you end up getting. Right now is a totally different story.
Yeah. And this is something like I've talked to Hong Shu about too, about, job hunting and things like that. It's about having a runway. It's about how much money can you how much do you have saved up? How much are you comfortable spending? And how much are you comfortable not having in a savings account? And I think a
Yep.
lot of people don't necessarily think about that. But I mean, the runway thing, it also applies to anybody currently working. Have a runway in case, because I mean, I hate to say it, but like a layoff is coming for you. It's funny because I was like listening to
Mhm.
an episode I did like, I don't know, a year ago. And I was like, you're going to get laid off. I might get laid off again. And then here we are, like a few months later, getting laid off. It's just like, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not this year, next year, year after that. Maybe it happens in 2030. But at some point, I'd be shocked if you do not get laid off throughout the course of your career. So having something 6 months saved up, just keep it there. Don't touch it. It looks like a lot of money. Yes. Figure out what your expenses are. I feel like a dad right now. Like, I feel like an old dad. Like you gotta have the savings account, but like figure out what your expenses are times 6, have 6 months saved away. You might have to eat peanut butter sandwiches. You might not get your like fancy frappa whatever latte every morning, but like, drink some goddamn Keurig for 6 months from Walmart and like just, deal with it. You gotta have coffee. I'm not saying don't drink coffee. You clearly need to have coffee in the morning, but it might not be fancy coffee. It'll be, swill, but caffeine.
And these are the everyday realities that executives do not have to think about. And so I would like to call this out as something to consider, right? Why is it that workers have to plan for a layoff, to have a 6-month runway, to sacrifice their coffee, right? Like, why is it that we have to do that and executives don't have to give that a single solitary moment of thought? They could stop working tomorrow. They could stop being in their jobs tomorrow and never have to make a single dollar for the rest of their lives. And in fact, they could live like 500 lifetimes and never run out of money. And so I want people to think about that. Why is that the case? And when you're in a workplace and you feel like you're in a good spot, what can you do to start building up some community and perhaps organize, or yes, the U word, unionize? Yeah, tech has a history of unionization efforts going back, 40 some odd years, if not longer. And while it has become less of a thing over the past several decades, it's starting to become more of a thing. And we've seen unionization efforts at lots of different companies. And the benefits aren't just like, oh, make sure you're making enough money and make sure you're not working in squalid conditions and you get like a pee break and you don't have to pee inside of a water bottle like Amazon drivers, right?
Insane.
It's like this helps with if you encounter discrimination or harassment or racism in the workplace, you have people to support you. This helps with working conditions, like making sure you have an ergonomic desk set up. It brings transparency to compensation levels and are people being compensated fairly across the board. It can help in the case of a layoffs where you can collectively bargain for a better severance package. And we saw that happen with Kickstarter a couple years ago when there were layoffs. So, if you feel like you've had this really great cushy job in UX or in tech, and you're like, oh, I don't need a union, like they treat us really well. Well, they can't treat you well anymore if you don't actually have a job.
Sure.
There's no job to go to where you will be treated well. And so, we don't want these things to further erode. And I think this is a moment for us to recognize that we are a group of workers. We make a little bit more money than some other workers, but we're very far off from the people who are making the decisions and kind of controlling our lives in a large way. And so what can we put in place inside of organizations to make sure that these things maybe don't happen or don't happen as much, or if they do happen, then they are letting people go in a more ethical sort of way. So just some things to think about for the future.
Absolutely. And not only are CEOs don't have to worry about working again, they don't have to worry about being fired either, because generally speaking, they are never held accountable. And the funny thing, the ironic thing is that generally it's a leadership problem, and it was a problem with the leadership, which is why the business is doing poorly, which is why we need to lay people off. The people at the top are never held accountable. So it's the irony there, not only do they not have to worry about working a day in their life, they don't have to worry about getting laid off either, because they're the ones making the decision.
Executives aren't held accountable by workers. They're held accountable to shareholders and executive boards. And the only reason a CEO will get kicked out is if they aren't meeting the business goals that will benefit the board and shareholders. That's the only accountability that exists there. So yes, we need more worker accountability to executives.
And if you haven't read Mike Montero's You Need a Tech Union, go out and buy it. Or You Need a Union. Is it You Need a Tech Union or You Need a Union?
It was actually Ethan Marcotte wrote that
he didn't write it?
book.
I thought Mike Montero wrote it. Okay.
No, Mike Montero, what did he... So Ethan Marcotte wrote You Deserve a Tech Union, and keyword deserve, right? Because we all deserve that. And Mike Montero has also written some things. There's a few voices on writing on this topic. And so lots of great literature out there. There's also the Tech Workers Coalition. If you'd like to get some training or learn more about how to get organized and join in on some different projects. So techworkerscoalition.org is where you can find out more about that.
Yeah, you're right. Cool. So we've talked a lot about this. I got some questions I want to ask you to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Before we do that, let everybody listening out there know where to find you, website, LinkedIn, all that stuff. And give yourself a plug.
Yeah, I hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit, maybe a bit more than I should, especially these days. So I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more. But yeah, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I like to talk about all of these topics and more. I have a website, which is amysantee.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, which comes out, a couple times a month or so. I also co-host a podcast with Laura Klein. It's called What is Wrong with Hiring? So find that on any podcast app that you use. And I think that's pretty much it. But this has been really fun to dig into these different topics. And thanks again for inviting me to join you.
Yeah. Well, we're not over yet. We still got those questions to ask.
Oh.
All right. Are you?
Oh yeah, right.
We still got those questions. Are you ready?
I'll say that again later.
It's all good.
All right. I'm ready. Are these surprise questions?
Yeah, but they're very easy. I know if you get them wrong, nobody will know. All right. What is your favorite non-design book?
Ooh. Non-design book. Oh my God. I don't know. I'm a really huge fan of comics and graphic novels.
Oh, nice.
And no particular title comes to mind, but there's just something about sitting down with something visual that you can read through really quickly and stimulate your brain in a non-textual kind of way. So I like anything by Guy Delisle. I also like the Walking Dead series, not just the TV show, but the comic series. So definitely graphic novels.
Have they finished the Walking Dead series, the graphic novels, or are they still going with them?
I don't know. They have finished the TV show, finally.
Oh my God.
It was literally like a zombie. It just would never die.
It's funny. We used to watch, I read, I didn't read all of them. I think I read volume 1 and volume 2, like the big thick ones. I never did get to the third one, so I don't know what happens. But in the show, my wife and I, we used to watch The Walking Dead all the time, and we lasted 7 seasons, I think, or 6 seasons. And we finally were just like, this is like a soap opera. Like, it's just new cast, new stories, same show, but different everything, We're just like, we started watching the other spinoffs, and we're like, I can't. This is too much time. Too much time. I can't do it. We got other stuff to do.
It's like the Grey's Anatomy or like the All My Children of millennials or something, right? It's like you get bought in. I finished all 11 seasons. I've watched every single spinoff, and please, I need to be done with that.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I didn't realize that they actually officially ended. We used to watch like Talking Dead afterwards, and we would watch the show and then Talking Dead. Oh man, and back before streaming was big. This was on.
Right.
All right. What is your favorite non-design podcast?
Ooh, so I really love podcasts about cults and scams and con artists. So, and like sketchy business people. There's several, there's one called, what is it called? I think that's a cult, or so I think that's a cult, something like that. There is a really great podcast called Duped, D-U-P-E-D, and it's about the dark side of online businesses. And that includes coaches and other trainings and things like that. So that's a really great one. There's a podcast I love called Behind the Bastards, and it's basically a show about all of these bastards in history and the present day who are just people who do really bad stuff and have way too much power. So you'll find several CEOs on there. You'll find Hitler. You'll find all kinds of folks. That's a really interesting one. I also like a podcast called On the Media. And I tend to stay away from like mainstream media for a lot of reasons. But this one is a critical take on the field of journalism and the activities and works of journalists. So that's a pretty interesting one as well.
I love it. And if I'm not mistaken, this might not be your favorite, but if it was it you, we were on Slack or something, and somebody mentioned podcasts, and you mentioned the history of Byzantium. Was that you?
Oh, yes.
That was you? Okay,
yeah,
right on.
Me.
I am like caught up, dude. I have caught up all 300 something episodes of that freaking, and I listened to all the history of Rome before history of Byzantium. It's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. History of Byzantium. I have it right here. History of Rome. The History of English podcast. If you're like a linguistics freak, that's super cool.
I like that one. There's also the British history podcast, which is not about English, but it's about the history of Britain. And anyway, that one's really fascinating too. But anyway, the history of Byzantium. You might, I don't know if you'd appreciate this, but the other day, my kids, I actually need to email Robin from the history of Byzantium and tell him this because he might appreciate this. My kids are watching How to Train Your Dragon. And it's all about like Vikings and stuff. And they talked in the thing of like, oh, this hasn't happened since the Battle of Pliska with Emperor Nicephorus and blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God, that's a real thing. You know? And my kids were like, what are you talking? Shut up, Dad. Anyway,
that's a great one.
If I hadn't listened to the history of Byzantium, I would have never known that. But anyway.
And that guy's voice is so nice too.
Isn't it great? I know. He's definitely, he was like a radio announcer. You know, I think he did like radio before. Or TV. He did TV stuff.
Kidding.
Anyway. Yeah, he's got a great voice. I love that dude. All right. What is your favorite meal?
I love sushi. I love pizza, but I developed lactose intolerance in the pandemic, so I can't really down a half a pizza anymore, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that.
Which is probably a good thing to
for your body long term.
Avoid doing that on a regular basis. But the pandemic, that was some times right there.
I didn't know you could just evolve or evolve is the wrong word. I didn't know you could just develop, I guess, a lactose over time.
You lose the enzymes.
Oh,
so your body depletes the enzymes that you use to be able to digest dairy, essentially.
Really?
And so I just ate so much fucking cheese and dairy my whole life, especially in the pandemic, that it just went away.
So you can eat too much pizza.
You can.
God, that makes me so sad.
Yep.
Wow. And I guess there's no way to like replenish that either. Well, that's a bummer.
Well, if I want to eat dairy, I take lactose. I take lactase pills.
Oh, man. Dude, my 5-year-old eats so much freaking cheese. We go through like string cheese and like the little pre thing, like Baby Bells and stuff. This kid will eat, like as soon as I get home from the grocery, he's like scarfing them down. So he's at some point, this kid he's going to definitely run out of that enzyme at some point in the future.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite vacation spot?
Okay, I have a few countries that I've really enjoyed. Japan, for sure. Lots of cool ancient history there. Iceland is really neat. There's all kinds of geographic and environmental variation there, including like, icebergs and deserts and black sand beaches and forests.
Now,
like it's very cool.
Get a front row seat to that?
Yeah, volcanoes. Japan, Iceland. And as a history buff, I really need to make it back over to Europe and check out more castles and ancient ruins. Like I just need to get over there and do that. And I will say lastly, just doing road trips around the Pacific Northwest here in Oregon and Washington. It's such a beautiful area.
Oh, it is so pretty. Yeah. My wife and I, we went to Portland and Seattle like 10 years ago or so. And we went in, I think it was the spring, and we happened to go the week that like it was beautiful for some reason. Like it normally, I don't think, whatever time we went, my friend who lived there was like, it's never like this during this time of year. But it was like sunny. But we went to Oregon, we did a bunch of stuff, and then we Portland, and we took the Cascades up to Seattle. And that was so pretty. The train, oh my God, that was so beautiful. And we saw like Mount Rainier,
nice,
like Galloping Gertie Bridge, the bridge that like collapsed and stuff.
Mount St. Helens, the one that exploded in like 1982 or whatever.
Yeah, it was so pretty. But we did like a hike. It was so cool because we went hiking in the morning and then drove to the beach in the afternoon. We were having margaritas. I was like, I've never gone hiking in the morning and margaritas in the afternoon on the same day. That was like so cool on the beach. Anyway, that was beautiful up there. All right. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
None.
Like you just hate them all, or it's just Figma's so good?
I haven't been doing UX for so long now. I've tried to avoid learning, Miro and Mural and Notion. I've never used Figma. The only thing I ever used Figma for was testing prototypes. And so, but I never designed anything. I wonder if I need to keep up with tools, but at the same time, I'm really appreciative of not having to use tools like that. So, I don't really have a favorite tool. I'm just a good old fashioned Google Suite kind of
That's all you
person.
need. That's all you need. Why futz with what works? If it works, it works.
Right.
All right, Amy. Well, This was
Exactly.
awesome. Great conversation. I think a lot of people out there are going to hear this and get quite a lot out of it. So I really appreciate you coming on. One more time before we get out of here, give yourself a plug. Tell everybody where they can find you, listen to you, all that stuff.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I hang out there quite a bit, which I should probably reevaluate that particular life choice at this point in time. But no, I talk about a lot of different topics like the ones we've discussed today over on there. You can go to my website, amysantee.com, which you can also find a sign up to my newsletter, which I send out a couple times a month.
Yeah, you're right.
And I also am the co-host with Laura Klein of the podcast, What is Wrong with Hiring? So you can find that on any podcast app that you listen to.
Hell yeah. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. So make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com for the show notes to get links to all that stuff. And don't forget, y'all, Amy will be joining me live on Friday, April 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern to answer all your burning questions about the current state of the UX job market. And you can find more details and links to the event at beyonduxdesign.com/events. Make sure to get your questions in. You can use the form on that events page. You can email me at hello@beyonduxdesign.com, or you can even holler at me on LinkedIn. Amy, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. This was great.
Well, all right, y'all, that's it for Amy and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on this mess that is the current state of the UX job market. But I'm curious, what's it been like for you? Have you experienced any of these things? Are you worried about anything? Do you have any predictions on when this might be over with? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. One more shout out to Christina for leaving some fantastic feedback for the Beyond UX Design book. Don't forget, if you pick up the book from beyonduxdesign.com/book and you leave some honest feedback, you'll get a chance to win a shout out on the show just like this. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your copy today. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Rodney, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. There's some awesome perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shot on the show every week. There's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. And if you want to transform your career from fuzzy to focused, make sure to grab UX Playbook's Fast Track Bundle. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/playbook and use the promo code BEYOND for nearly $25 off all those examples, videos, tips, handcrafted by my buddy Chris Wynn. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. Action.
There are some... What?
That's action.
Oh,
I was making a joke.
a dad joke. So dad.
I am what I am.